You said we are all called.
We are all called.
And what does that mean?
We are all called, man. I think, as we navigate life and trying to find our purpose, is I think the goal of everyone, every human. But at the end of the day, it's our job to figure out how to get back to humanity and get back to this world before we exit. And I feel like God has definitely made that clear in the good book that we are called. And so that's kind of how I live my life, man. And it looks different from person to person. It really depends. And so sometimes we're faced with things that happens to us in our life, or we cross with some adversity that happens in our life, and underneath it all, is what I've learned is that there's some calling in that, and I'll give you an example. My daughter got diagnosed with leukemia almost 3 years ago, and as you can imagine, very tough to deal with. But underneath it all, there is a calling in it, and that was for us to, as a family, create a vision to give back to families who were going through the same situation we were going through, in our fight with cancer, but also their fight with cancer. And so that was the birth of Cleats versus Cancer, and we're going into our third year doing that. And so just it really forces you to look beyond your own situation, your own tragedy, to find, I think, what's the word, the silver lining in it.
Hmm.
And so I am blessed to be able to have the intestinal fortitude to not, be a victim, but try to find some good in it.
Well, I know your daughter is cancer free. God bless. And I'm
Yes.
happy to hear that. Where does that intestinal fortitude come from, and why do some people have it and some people not have it? And can it be can it be mentored? Can it be taught? Can it be inspired?
I think it could be taught. I think, enthusiasm is caught, right? And so I know for me, where it comes from is I grew up a very poor young man, in a small town called Hungerford, Texas, of 800 people. I remember times when, we had rodents in the house and snakes in the house, and we didn't have heating in the house. And so I slept with my mom and under tons of blankets, and the only heat in the house was in the bathroom, which we would go in there and light the pilot and turn it on, and that's where we would go and get dressed. And so I created, in my mind, a sense of urgency from my life. I don't know if it was innate. I don't know if I had it, if it was in me, but I knew one thing, that I was going to make a difference, and I was going to change the trajectory of the family. And so that's where my intestinal fortitude came from in my mind. But I do think that it could be caught. I think it could be learned. It could be a learned behavior. It really depends on who you're around and what you're internalizing. If you're internalizing greatness, then greatness is more than likely will come out. If you're internalizing, junk, then junk will come out, right? So, and I work with student athletes. I work with high school kids as well, and so I see it. I see it every day, every day.
When people ask you, what do? What do you tell them?
I am blessed to have an opportunity to do what I love. And at the end of the day, that is to inspire and motivate people. And a lot of those people are young people. And so if you was to ask me as a youngster if I would be, doing the line of work that I'm doing, if I would be standing in front of adults and doing diversity trainings, if I would be standing in front of, an audience of 800 to 900 young people, you know, in a school assembly, I would laugh and say, yeah, that wouldn't be me, because I was the most shyest kid coming up, didn't want to talk in front of people. but God will take that very thing that you are scared of, the very thing that you're frightened, and turn it around to for your good. And man, what a blessing to be able to come through, what I've come through, and to be able to spread the good news, man, and tell my story, but also tell, a human story that, a lot of people come from dire straits. A lot of people come from poverty. A lot of people dealt with hardship. Some of our greatest Americans, man, came from dire hardship situations, man. And I think that's where that intestinal fortitude comes from, so, I watched, and heard stories of my mom and her sisters and brothers picking cotton, when they were growing up, and how brutal that was. I mean, there's so many different examples, but at some point, when you live in this life, you have to make up your mind and make a decision of what you're going to do with your life and what kind of mark you want to leave. One of the other things I talk about all the time is not only the calling but the dash. It's
Yeah.
like, make sure you're living in your calling, but make sure it's something that can be documented, that a legacy can be left behind, a body of work, and so I'm very in tune with that. I try to get other folks to kind of get to that place. And in the Bible it says there's a season. There's Everyone has a different season for everything, and of course we don't all get there at the same time. But our job is continue to hold each other accountable and continue to inspire and motivate. And then when it's your season, man, hopefully you're locked and loaded and ready to take full advantage of it.
Yeah, I saw you talked about living your dash.
Yes. Yes.
I,
That causes a lot of conversation, believe me, because when I say that, people kind of scratch their head like, okay, what does that actually mean?
well, you like to cause conversation.
Hey, I think, in anything, conversation can allow some healing. Conversation can get people on the same page. Conversation can, you know, forward some partnerships. And now you don't always have to agree, but I think a lot of clarity comes through it. And I think, especially now in the era we're in, we're not talking and having a conversation, man. It's not good. It could be a bad thing. So I think the more we can conversate and the more we can see that we're similar or more similar than we are different, I think the better off this community can be.
I kind of find comfort in believing that everything happens for a reason. Otherwise, I don't know why anything happens. So, what do you think about that?
That everything happens for a reason. I'm a believer. I believe that.
That even the adversity makes us stronger. I know in your case, it seems you believe that adversity is often a key element of the lives of people who become leaders.
Yeah, I think adversity is inevitable. I think it's there. I think, you know when you say adversity, really what you're talking about is life. Because I don't think there's anyone living that haven't been faced with some type of hardship, and that's, if you come from a very, you know prominent background or not, there it's gonna knock on your door at some point. And so yeah, I think the challenge is, what do we do with it? What do we do with it constantly as we evolve? These things are gonna happen that we didn't plan for, right? And so, how do we respond? And it's like, I coach the game of football, and I'm fortunate that I get to do that. In a lot of the things we talk about with our student athletes is like, when things are not going your way, like, how are you going to respond? And really what we're talking about is life. Life is like that. It's not going to always go your way. You're not going to always win in life, right? And so, what do you do when you don't? The sign of your character will show through.
I think character is the most important asset we have.
Yep, absolutely.
So when you come in contact with a kid who's, you know, you see some of yourself in that kid. Maybe he doesn't know his father. His mother's on hard times. How do you inspire that kid to believe in himself?
I tell them I see what I see in you is me, you know, and I give him my story immediately. I almost have this conversation weekly with young men that are backsliding, that can't quite meet the bar, that continues to get in their own way. And I tell them, like, man, I get it. Like, I didn't have a dad. My dad didn't give a damn about who I was as a person in my future. But at some point, you have to get to, you know, a place where you have to decide that nothing else matters, right? No one's going to care. No one's going to care. So you have to care enough to give yourself an opportunity. And by doing that, that means what I'm talking about is going to class, you know, being coachable, you know, doing what you're supposed to do, being on time, doing your homework, getting on the Zoom calls when you're supposed to be on them, and being present with your camera on. These are all the ingredients to you being successful, you know, but no one's going to care that you grew up in a hardship and you didn't know your father, or no one's going to care that you know, you're living below the poverty line, you know, and that's just what it is. As soon as we can understand that, the quicker we can become, you know, the kind of people that we want to be, and be the vessel that we're supposed to be. But so often we spend our time playing the victim. You know, oh man, I didn't, you know, this happened and this happened to me, and you know, I've gotten to a place in my life when adversity hits or something doesn't go right. The first thing I do is try to find, okay, what's the solution in this? Like, what's God trying to tell me here?
To me, that's resilience, and 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 I think resilience is a critical um, ability to have. And I'm not sure, you know, I haven't figured out how to instill resilience. And first of all, I have to say, when if part of your message is nobody cares, the fact is you care and they know you care. And I think that's part of being a great coach. And Greg and I have talked a lot about coaching, and it's way more than X's and O's and where to be in a certain point on the field. It's if you're going to coach, I believe, and I know Greg does, and we've all had a lot of coaches, it's the ones who we know care about us,
Hmm.
not necessarily how talented we are. I
Right.
mean, at some point, at the level you got to, everybody was talented.
Yeah.
Um, but it's the coaches who impact your life, not just your skills. And when I look at you and when I read about you, if somebody asked me what you do, I would call you an educator. What does education mean to you?
Man, that's pretty deep. I like that actually. An educator. I think that's the key. I think that's the key. For me, it was the key to getting out of poverty. It was the key to going to college, you know, and getting a degree. Wasn't a smart guy, the smartest in the class. Didn't have to be, but because I was willing and able and committed, you know, it was a game changer. And I think, you know, continuing to have that discussion with young people is, if you will embrace education and everything that comes with it, I mean, your futures will be bright. It will be bright. It doesn't mean you're gonna go make $1 million, but but it also means you'll have the tools that you need to be successful in this life and to be able to navigate this life. And so education, if I was to sum it up, every education is everything.
Hmm.
You know, it's a game changer. And you look at the disparities in in this country. A lot of it comes down to the kids. You know, the schools that the kids are going to, and and the communities they're coming from, and the lack of education, and how that perpetuates throughout, you know, a person's family. When your grandma didn't go to school and then graduate from high school, and then your mom didn't graduate from high school, well, At some point, somebody has to break that generational curse. And so that a lot of the conversations, and I've had, many on both sides of the spectrum where it's extremely dire, and then there's others where they got all the resources in the world but still having some challenges. But if I was to sum it up, I would say education is everything.
Hey, Derek, I got a question for you. And we talked about this before too, but it's when you're a youth like we were, and you're playing sports and you're trying to find your way through, and all you have is your talent. People like you because you're a good athlete. But we both know that you don't really know yourself at that point. So you're looking up for mentors and coaches, and you're getting that advice, but it doesn't mean a whole lot until you go through the process. And I'm always a believer that until you know yourself or you're self-aware, you can't really lead and teach people the right way. But in your story, which is kind of crazy, when do you feel like you kind of, hey, this is who I am. I'm Derek Sparks, and this is what I'm about. And you kind of moved on about all the negative stuff, and you're able to start helping people. When did that happen for you? When did you feel like I know who I am now?
I think it happened in high school. I think it happened when I was a high school senior and I was transferring from Montclair College Preparatory to Modern Day Catholic. And I saw how the adults in the situation was so hell bent on destroying a young man's dream because he was transferring schools, and they knew that they could no longer use his athletic prowess to kind of hoist themselves up and their school up. And that's when I think I became kind of came into my own as a young man that understood that I needed to do things better than they ever been done, and I needed to have integrity about you know who about my business and what I allowed to happen to me moving forward. That's when I took ownership of my future, because I realized that the adults who I trusted didn't always have my best interests at heart. And so when I was at that time, I was 17 years old. I hadn't had my birthday yet. Was in football season, going to a new school, and that's when I stepped into my own as a young man. And I said, you know what, I'm going to take um, this situation into my own hands, and I'm going to do this thing with integrity. And I'm no longer going to allow hangers on and people with hidden agendas and folks who didn't have my best interests at heart. I was going to make sure that that I took control. And one of the reasons why, when I graduated, I went to play at Washington State University is because I was intentional about leaving the state of California and getting away from the people that I knew didn't truly have my best interest at heart.
Well, you took it a lot further than that, because first you took control of your own life and your own self-esteem and image of yourself, but you consciously made a decision at some point that you were going to share all the wisdom, hard-earned wisdom, with every other kid you met that was having trouble. When did that become? Greg and I talk about passion, principle, and purpose. There's no question of your passion and your principle. I think you're an extremely principled guy. But when did that become your purpose?
I think, when you're an athlete and all you've done, your entire, life up to the college point, was play the game, your identity is in the sport. And I remember back then, if you were on a full athletic scholarship, you couldn't even work, you couldn't even hold a job because of the NCAA rules. And so I had never worked a job. I did some stuff with my uncle that owned a kind of a carpet cleaning business, and I would work with him during the summers and stuff like that. But my identity, as many others, are wrapped into, your identity as a football player, a basketball player, or whatever that may be. But when I was in college and I started to pen, my book, Lessons of the Game, that's when it started to become clear to me, purpose outside of the game. And that's a very hard and thing to wrap your head around when you're, a student athlete, and folks are telling you that you're going to be the next, great NFL or NBA or Major League Baseball player, and you buy into it wholeheartedly, and that's your focus. But what they don't tell you is that the likelihood of that actually coming full circle is very unlikely because it's so many other factors that doesn't have anything to do with your talent level.
Mm.
And so for me, I think my eyes was wide open, and when I started to write lessons of the game, it was very um, emotional and therapeutic for me. And some things got revealed to me during that process, with regard to purpose. I knew that that God was going to use me in some way, form, or fashion. I didn't know how just yet, but I knew that was going to be a part of, you know, kind of my new identity. And lo and behold, man, I ended up, sustaining a knee injury my senior year, and how devastating that was as a student athlete, because I knew at that point that my chances of playing in the NFL was that light now got even dimmer. And so I, fast forward, graduated, took a year just to rehab, because in my mind I still had this football identity, and that's what I focused on. Worked on my book, and then um, after that year, had an opportunity to go to try out with the San Francisco 49ers when Steve Mariucci was there. And Steve knew me back in high school, from all the things I did as an All-American, and he brought me into camp. And that's when it all dawned on me that I was not going to be a national football player, and playing in the league, man. What a great experience, but really, it all came full circle. And that voice that you hear, that that God has something else for you, and this is not it.
Mm.
And I remember leaving that camp, and immediately my purpose was to go ahead and release my book, to go on a book tour. And lo and behold, my purpose was tied to the book tour, because I met a young lady at the time, Mary Clift. She came to one of my book signings in Bellevue here in Washington State, and she's a school teacher. And she said, I want an autographed copy of your book, but also I want to ask you, would you be willing to come talk to my class? And so we talked a little bit about our class, and she's an elementary school teacher in a small town, and so I said sure. End up going to her school, and when I arrived at the school, I remember it like yesterday. I walked into the school, and I signed in, and they directed me to go to the gymnasium. And when I got to the gym, it was the whole school packed in the gym.
Mm.
And at that moment, my purpose was born.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I said, man, God set me up, because I was fine with speaking to 20 or 30 kids in the classroom.
Yeah.
I was not fine, however, speaking to 800 in the gym.
Mm. Yeah.
I instantly started sweating, uh, and my heart started pounding, and I was like, man, this feels like game day.
Different type of pregame jitters.
It's different type, man.
No,
I
that,
walked away from that experience more impacted than I think the kids were.
mm.
That experience took me to a level that I hadn't known before. And I walked away motivated, and I said to myself, oh my gosh, like I really have to get a game plan together here to have an opportunity to have that many kids that are trying to hear something from you, and that very moment that could be life changing. I took that very, very seriously. And I said, I need, and that's when the whole birth of game time and the movement, and game time being a way of life, and game time is about giving you an opportunity to be successful in life, no matter your hardships, no matter where you come from, no matter who said you couldn't. It's game time in your life. And I tied it to sport because I understood that kids love sports, right? And that was the birth of, you know, me speaking, and 200 plus schools later, God should reveal something to me in that moment. That became my purpose.
Hey, Derek, when I met you and we went to Lake Washington High School, it was the first time I actually saw you speak to a group of students. And Rob, I'm sitting on the side, and I'm like, Derek said, I got this. We had this stuff. And I said, what's your talk today? He's, Greg, this is going to be the locker room speech. And so I'm like, okay. So I went and sat. And as he was speaking, he had some media playing, some locker rooms, some football. I was watching the eyes of all the kids watching. You know how you see people who are engaged? I've been a lot of talks, a lot of speeches.
Yeah.
And you might have some people engaged. These kids, their eyes were big and they were engaged. And Derek, tell more about what your locker room speech was. I thought it was really cool how you kind of put the sports theme in there, but had a message.
Yeah, I think the locker room speech is we're not going to pull any punches conversation. It's a conversation that you have that sometimes or oftentimes folks aren't ready to hear. It's one of those pep talks that folks need to kind of get out of the rut, get out of their own way. It's one of those talks that puts the ownership back on them, that, hey, you are called, regardless of what you're going through in your circumstances right here today as a high school student. And the fact that this is a safe space to share. This is a safe space to cry. This is a safe space in these four walls. What we say here is not going to go anywhere. And as you know, being in the locker room, that's one thing that you hold sacred, is the fact that whatever we talk about in here, and whatever the coach says to us stays in his locker room, right? And so my approach was, not all kids have been in the locker room. Not all kids have experienced a pep talk from a big time college football coach. And so I wanted to replicate that for those young men and young girls, that, hey, here's the temperament. Here is what we call setting the tone. And man, I tell you, I had a young girl walk up, because I opened it up for if you had a comment, question, whatever you were feeling in that moment. And I had a gal come up, and she broke down in front of the whole school, and she cried about a hardship she was having. And you could see the administrators and how they were impacted. But man, what a powerful moment.
Derek, what does success mean to you? When you say you try to prepare kids for success, and I imagine, at one point success was making the NFL. What is your definition of success?
I think for me, the word success is tied directly to my call. It's tied directly to the dash that I talk about. And if I'm able to execute my calling in life, now it's never going to be perfect, but if I'm conscious and I'm always working towards, the legacy and leaving something behind that is noteworthy, that I would consider that a success story. It's not tied to money. It's not tied to material things. It's not tied to property or wealth or any of that. But simply as a human being, we were born on one day, and we're going to exit on another day. Is your life noteworthy? Is what you left behind something that has impacted someone who has needed to hear something positive, someone who needed, help in a moment they're in a hardship, whatever the case may be. And man, at the end of the day, if I can truly say that when I'm at the pearly gates, man, I'm happy. I'm happy.
Well, typically ninth grader, 10th grader isn't thinking much about the pearly gates.
No,
How do you encourage them as to finding success? And what do you try to educate them as to what their success can be?
yeah, and you're right. You're right. And I think too, it's just back to education. Part of our job is to educate and to frame the conversation for them to understand that they don't have a lot of time. And so the reason why I frame it that way is for them to understand that this situation in this lifetime that we have does have a expiration date on it.
Mm,
Oftentimes students and kids kind of go through their experience thinking that they have all the time in the world, right?
yeah.
And that if I don't do it today, if I don't get the grade today in class, then I can get it tomorrow. If I don't do my homework today, it's going to be okay because I can do my homework next time. Or if I don't pass you know, my exams today, then I can do it the next time. And
Mm,
I'm simply saying, have some emergence around what you're trying to accomplish,
mm,
because time is of the essence, and you can't get it back. And so, whatever that is, okay, you want to go. The first question: who wants to go to college?
mm.
Who wants to go? Not even a 4 year. Who wants to go to community college, which is a lot of times a better track for students to
Yeah.
figure out what they want to do. Who wants to own their own business? Who wants to be a landscaper? Or who wants to be an architect? Or what's your passion? Like, where do you see yourself post high school? And so we bring it back down. The overarching is this thing has an expiration on it. But now let's bring it down to your level and let's talk about things that you're dealing with right here as a high school student or as a middle school student.
Mm,
Hey, Derek, I want to ask you something, and you mentioned it a number of times. One thing I respect and admire about you, because I know there's a lot of good people with great intentions that have great backgrounds, but you talk about answering the call, and I've seen you in action there. So I want you to talk a little bit about the House of Champions.
mm.
Who's the little guy that got paralyzed from the football thing where you called me? You said, I'm heading down there. I want to help him. The Cleats versus Cancer. To me, it's like you hear these things and you answer the call no matter what. And that's how I think it ties into your purpose. Because not only do you say what your purpose is, you do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I was in a situation I got offered a job to be a head football coach at a local high school here in Seattle. Wasn't sure if it was something I, wanted to do, but I did it because I felt like I was doing a friend a favor, and they were looking for someone to help turn their program around. Probably one of the best decisions I've made, because I'm still coaching the game of football, which I love. But while I was doing that, something got revealed to me. And sometimes we got to get ourselves out of our own way, because I could have easily talked myself out of coaching and accepting that position. Well, what I found out is there was some kids there that were on the football team that end up being homeless. And one day I got a phone call that, we're on spring break, and I got a call from DSHS, Department of Health and Human Services, I think is what it's called. And the person on the other end said, "Hey, coach, is this Coach Sparks?" And I said, "Yes." And said, "Well, we have a situation with one of your players." And I was like, "Oh boy, you know, one of our players did a boneheaded thing. They're in trouble." And that's where my head went to. And it turned out that one of our players was, living in a hotel, and the hotel had expired, and now they were sitting down at DSHS, and they needed some place to live. And I had that out of body experience where I
Mm,
was like, what? Like, it didn't make sense to me. So they said, "Hey, here's the address. Can you come down?" So I went, and I walked in, and here's this young man, Carrington, that that was in this situation. And it just blew me away because I never knew it. And the way he had masked that, and kept that a secret was simply amazing to me. And so here I am, walked into this situation, and this kid has a trash bag full of everything he owns. And immediately I was impacted.
Mm.
Immediately I saw myself in that kid because I saw poverty, I saw hardship, I saw despair, and I connected right away. Connected, and that's what God does to you. He puts you in these situations. If I had not answered the call to become this football coach, I would have never knew this young man and the fact that there is a homelessness issue in the Seattle school district. And so one thing led to another. This kid's at my, I'm responsible for this kid, and I'm just shaking my head, saying, "Man, God is something else. Like he's gonna get it from you some way or another, right?" And so I started this program called the House of Champions with the thought that it needed to be a legitimate wraparound service that really gave um, the youth an opportunity to heal. So that's where the counseling came in to have a reset where they can get their education back on track, because a lot of times, they're not really engaged in school because of the situation they're in, and then their nutrition, making sure they're eating the right things, because a lot of times they're eating, stuff that they find anywhere on the streets or whatever, leftovers, and so that was the birth of the House of Champions. And the local news station came out and heard about it and wanted to talk to the young man, and what he said on camera, just you couldn't help but tear up and get emotional, because what he had gone through with his mom and being on drugs and alcoholism and prostitution, and I just had to I looked at the situation and was like, this kid is only 15 years old.
Mm.
And it's just like, man, that hurt my soul. I was like, no kid should have to deal with this. And then I continued to pull the layers back. There was 19,000 in the state of Washington that experiencing homelessness at some level. And that what that means is they're sleeping on someone's couch, they're sleeping in a car, they could be sleeping on the street, they could be sleeping in a hotel. I mean, there's a wide range of different ways that you would consider someone homeless. So it was an eye opener, but definitely impacted my life. Um, and here I am again. Had no plans of doing any of that, but I had to answer the call.
We had this kid named Donovan that we heard, because CTE was a big issue, right? The helmets. And then like this high school kid, we heard he's like 14, got hit, was paralyzed. I called the mom, got a hold of her. He flew down to see him.
He
Ask
did.
him about that story. Yeah, it was so cool. He supported him, and he ended up dying, by the way.
That experience impacted me, and the birth of the House of Champions, and it being a program that could help kind of reset life for student athletes in particular, that's going through their bout with homelessness, and man, really how that could be something that could be replicated throughout the country. There should be a House of Champions in almost every community, because if you go to the local school district, they have a list of McKinney-Vento students who are, that's in other words, that's what they call their homeless student population. And McKinney-Vento is students that are in those dire straits. So, if I had the financial backing, I would put a House of Champions in almost every community throughout the country, because it's needed.
My whole career has been working with nonprofits, and there's got to be somebody in that population that would embrace it. So I'll certainly be thinking about it. And you know, one of the nonprofits I've worked with for a long time, and I had told Greg, is called Communities in Schools in Philadelphia.
Yes,
And
I'm familiar.
and the program in particular is ELECT, which is education leading to employment and career training. Well, ELECT deals with teenage parents in the high schools, and there were
Mhm.
400 at that time, but it was the fathers that I was most interested in. Part of me believes that, having not known your dad, I would think that somewhere in you is a desire to provide that kind of role to so many kids who um, don't know their father. And I think in the community, um, you know, there's a value in training better fathers, or training, you know, I don't know how to verbalize it, but I think it's a huge issue. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there is something there. As I've become an adult, I think there's definitely some trauma there that I hold on to, um, that is directly related to the absence of my dad, and I think as we continue to live our lives, things come up, and you wonder where does that come from, or where does that emotion come from, and I think it's tied to that trauma, and certainly, it's one of those things that I always say, God takes a negative and and makes it a positive. And so the positive, I'm always looking at the glass half full. I'm always looking at, okay, I had to go through that for a reason. And I think you said it, the feeling of being unwanted, of being, left behind, whatever you want to call it, does something to you, to where you want to prove that you're worthy, that
Hmm.
that you are, were, someone that was worth it, worth, hanging around, whatever. So I think, yeah, I think, but that's my story. That's my link to this huge population of kids who growing up without their dad. So I accept that. I understand it. I'm able to compartmentalize that now and not have it be a burden on my life. And I'm able to speak with clarity and empower the next generation that's going through the same thing. So I would definitely agree that it has done something to me, and even with my own children, trying to be relevant every day in their life, trying to be involved, making sure you tell them you love them every day. I send a text message out, have a great day, making it a great day, you know, and they feel that support and they feel that love, that man, my dad really is supportive, and he is really my biggest fan, and I want them to know what that feels like. And I think I do that because I know how it made me feel not to have it,
Hmm.
so hopefully I answered your question
Well,
on
you
that.
did. I mean, I think that's again, it kind of comes back to coaching and
Mhm.
the expanded role a coach can have on a kid's entire life, and their whole view of life and view of themselves. And if you love them, they're loved. At least they're loved by you. And
Yes.
and one thing I try to figure out is, I think a major concept in your life, and in all of our lives ideally, is empathy. And I think empathy is much too rare today. And I think it's just a critical um, quality. And I
Yeah.
and I know you're a passionate guy, and obviously an empathetic guy. You care for anybody who's hurting. How do we make people more empathetic?
Yeah. No, that's the $1 million question. I think you definitely have to be in tune with your calling.
Mm,
You really do. If you're in tune with your calling, you get it, you understand it, you understand your purpose, and you try to lead a life that aligns with that every day. And it could be as simple as, I was getting gas this morning, and a young man walks over and asks me, you know, for some money for gas. His car was pulled up at the gas pump, and he didn't have any money. And I don't even carry money. So I walk over and put my card in, put in my code, get a guy some gas. When you are always living your life according to your calling and you understand it, things happen to you, and it's just a reminder that you're actually living in it. You're actually alive, right? You're actually, you know what I mean? And you're actually present. Because a lot of times people aren't present. They're so overwhelmed with life, and they're being defeated by life, to where we forget that, you know, we're still called. We still have a responsibility to humanity, even in dire straits yourself, even though you're going through something. That's when he wants to use you the most, and not to get on the God topic, because I know sometimes that makes people uncomfortable.
That's all right.
Whatever you believe in, if you believe there's a higher power, whatever that looks like for you. But at the end of the day, you better have lived a great life, and understand that if you get to the end of this thing, and there is a God, and there is a heaven and a hell,
The judge.
at least there's a judge, at least you know you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And so I try to make sure to do that. But yeah, empathy, man. How do you get people to live that way? It just goes, I think it goes back to purpose in your, if you don't have purpose, man, you just living, you just kind of wandering through life, and you got all these different emotions and reactions to everything, and that's not always a good thing.
Yeah, I think, Derek, just to answer for that a little bit for myself, I think you can't make somebody they're not, but you being a kind of a beacon up there speaking and showing empathy, especially with youth, we're still growing and learning. They're going to see that empathy and maybe implement into their lifestyle. And I think you do that already, because you're not going to just take somebody off the street and say you need to be empathetic. People are selfish most of the time, but
yeah,
I think people feed off of you.
I think that's exactly right. It's your actions, as we've heard before. It's not what you say, it's what you do.
Oh, but, man, I love it.
and another thing that I've seen, I've worked with people who are in, dire situations, and from mothers who have lost kids in the war, to children suffering PTSD, and the one thing that's come out of a lot of these sessions as to how to make somebody in shit shape feel that life is still worthwhile, and is when they understand that they can help somebody else who might be going through something just as bad or even worse. And that's when people get some hope again.
Because there's power in it. You can't tell someone something that you haven't actually experienced. I mean, they're going to look at you just like I had a pastor tell me one time. He said, be careful who you get advice from. Right? Why am I going to seek marriage counseling from someone that just went through a divorce? Or whatever that in any stage in life. Why would I seek counsel from a business owner that all of his businesses went belly up? And it's just be intentional about who you're getting advice and counsel from. So I think definitely, if you have more credibility, particularly with young people, if you've done some things, if you've been through some hardships, if you can speak to it and give examples of what that looks like, and how I identify with what you're saying, and here's why. Man, kids grow 10 feet when they see that you can speak to their situation. They're like, wow, I never knew that. Well, tell me more. How did you get through that situation in your life?
Mm.
and now they have some tangible things that they can apply, but if you never have done it, that's like, somebody telling a kid, because the hot topic is, kids want to play in the pros. It's like, you know, if you haven't been, in that realm, why would he listen to you tell him that he can't do it?
Yeah.
You know? So
So
anyway,
it's about credibility.
credibility is important, you know. So
Well, I would want my kid to play for you. I think kids that play for you are extremely fortunate because you're 110% in it. You've been to the top of the mountain. You speak the truth. The kids know, and I know that everything kind of comes down to trust. And I think the kids know they can trust you with their most intimate thoughts and with their lives because you'll cherish it and treat it, you know, carefully and thoughtfully.
that's awesome, man. I really appreciate that. I try to be as authentic as possible. I know there's a lot of folks out here will tell kids stuff that's, just to motivate them. But man, I try to keep it as 100 as possible so they know exactly where they are and why. And so, and I always follow up with the saying that if I was in your shoes, I would want someone to be honest with me.
I don't think there's any substitute for it.
No, but unfortunately, there's a whole bunch of coaches out here that'll tell a kid all kinds of stuff just to think that they're motivating them or trying to get them to perform or whatever the case may be, or they just don't want to tell them the truth because because they're lying to begin with.
Yeah.
You know, I just had this discussion yesterday with one of my running backs about playing time, and I was as authentic as possible. Here's how this works. And at the end of it, he walked away saying, I appreciate it, coach. Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you for not sugarcoating it. Thank you for telling me the truth.
Yeah.
Or you could string a kid along and tell them what they want to hear. And then you're going to be in the same discussion next week.
Well, we've all seen coaches that are a lot more concerned with their careers and their welfare than those of the kids that they're coaching.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They say money is the root of all evil. So as soon as you start paying coaches millions of dollars, the whole narrative changes.
Right. It's just win. It's just win.
Hey, I think that goes for, hey, I watch this AU basketball. I think it goes for youth too, because they're getting this private training, these AU teams. They don't necessarily care about all these kids. They want
No,
the best team quickest and weed them out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. So I always say, when people ask me about coaching, is three things. I get to coach the game.
Mm.
I get to.
Yeah.
It's a privilege. It's not something that is given, not something that is guaranteed. So while I have this opportunity, I want to make sure that my calling is in the work and that I'm doing everything I absolutely can do to maximize this time because as you know, coaching can, at least at the NC2A level, it's a short lifespan, right? Coaches come and go, new staffs come and go. So I want to make sure that on my watch that my position, which is the running backs, they get what they supposed to get.
Well, they're hearing it from the best. I mean, I watched your highlight tape, boy, man, you could play. I would not want to be like a D-back. See you come break through the line coming my way. No, thank you, sir.
Surprisingly, Rob, man, when I'm out here at practice, I'm in those receiving lines, man, running routes, and they like, Coach, you still got it, man.
I bet. I bet.
No, I appreciate that, man. God is good. God gave me a gift that I didn't I didn't take for granted.
Yeah.
I actually worked extremely hard, even though I had the talent. And that's why I was one of the top guys in the country, at running back, is because I put in a lot of work. And what a privilege, man, to be able to play the game. It has opened up so many doors for me, and I am extremely blessed to be one of the chosen ones to have that level of talent. Because it is truly special. It's something that you look back and you shake your head like wow, like you know that was powerful. And so I try to carry that same intensity and vision um, throughout life. Very conscious that it didn't have to be me. It could have been another young man. So I am extremely grateful. I am always trying to be half full, my glass half full, no matter what's going on. And I'm always conscious about leaving this place better than I found it. And at the end of the day, it's kind of hard to talk about perfection because nothing's perfect. But if the good outweighs the bad, I think you did a great job.
Well, I know you got to go. My last thing is a question that plagues me my whole life, and I've never gotten an answer. And I think the answer is the same as the others. It's how you live. But how did I worked with people in wheelchairs, amputees, quadriplegics, and they tell me how good life is. So many of them, and there are so many people who have everything given to them, and they're miserable. So if I could figure out, and I think you're on the path of making people appreciate what they have instead of, you know, being bitter about what they don't have.
Absolutely. Some of the most wealthiest people is the most miserable. I think we're programmed and sold that American dream, or not even American, just the dream of collecting
Mm.
material things. We are programmed as youngsters to want to obtain wealth and all those things, but man, none of those things matter. They're nice, but if you can, I've seen folks come into it, to some things, and lose their life because of it, because it's just too overwhelming. And so, but yeah, how can you appreciate the life that you have? And how can you have purpose in your life? It is truly a life's journey. Some folks don't get there. Some people don't get there at all,
Yeah.
right? And then some people get there in their season, 40s or 50s, or some get it, early on in their 20s. Like whenever that time is, their season is to understand what this life is about and how purpose is the goal. I think the better off folks are. And so I just can't imagine living a whole life and not getting to that point. But there's some that do.
Hey, Derek, Rob, one thing I was thinking about, you said that, is for me personally, it's like, we're all trying to figure out who we are, but until you accept yourself for who you are, if you're in a wheelchair or you're not good enough to make the team or whatever, and then you truly love yourself, because if you love yourself and you're okay with who you are, you're not really comparing yourself to anybody else. That's when you appreciate life a little more, right? And I think that's the hardest part to do, is accept yourself and love yourself, because we're always trying to figure out who we're supposed to be.
Mhm.
It's hard to find. I think maybe that's a lot with experience and failing and struggling, that you figure it out and you appreciate who you are, what you have. I'm doing God's work and answer the call because that's who I'm supposed to be. That's what I see and feel from you. It's like you've accepted things, you know who you are, you love yourself, and you're spreading it.
Yeah, and I think too, the blessing that we all seek, the blessing is in the work, the blessing is in the call. So as soon as we could figure out that we need to get to the work and to the passion and the purpose, then you will be blessed. You'll be blessed with peace. You'll be blessed with clarity. You'll be blessed with wealth. You'll be all the things that you was thinking about you wanted, and was going about it all the wrong way. It's not until you actually start doing the work and start to understand that this is bigger than you, that you'll actually start seeing those blessings. And man, I'm a testament of that big time. Like, and not to say that, you go out and do things because you want a return on it. That's not it. It's just like the universe has an interesting way of saying thank you.
Well, it's kind of thank you for your service, because that's what you're talking about, is service.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Living intentional. If you're living intentional and you're answering your call and you have purpose, what a great life, man. What a great life.
Well, I got to thank Greg for introducing me to you, because it's been a pleasure and an honor and a memorable time. And I'll be thinking about House of Champions, and certainly thinking about you. And I know Greg and I want to do stuff. So I appreciate your time and your wisdom. And again, I think you got to be one of the great coaches I've ever met, and keep doing it, because you're helping a lot of people, a lot of kids who desperately need help. And that's when we're formed, is when we're young. They're going to grow up to be empathetic, caring adults. And a lot of it's because they had you, who showed them that somebody loves me and cares about me.
Man, I really appreciate you saying that, Rob. Those words mean a lot. And just like you did research of me, I did my research too. So that coming from you, man, makes me feel good. It makes me feel like, I'm doing the right things. And I, we all got to pinch ourselves and just look around and make sure that this is actually real. That, man, I'm called to lead, to do this. And it's like, yeah, feel confident in that, and don't second guess it. So, we can't do it alone, can't do it by ourselves. I know my relationship with Greg, and, I'm always transparent about that. There's so many things we want to do, but just making sure that is it you that want to do it, and your intellect that wants to do it, or is that tied to your purpose and tied to your call? There's totally two different things. And so iron sharp as iron.
Yeah.
And I know Greg sharpens, continue to sharpen my iron all the time, and keep me focused on certain aspects, and just reminding me also, this is what I see. And I value, one of my most favorite things is valuing people's opinion. I'm always asking, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? What's your opinion? Because I am truly after the truth. And one of my best things is, man, just asking, hey, can we have a conversation? And so, and that's how you stay, true to your call, and so anyway, we could talk all day. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me be a part of your universe today.
Oh, thank you, Derek.
Thanks,
Greg,
Derek.
thank you as always.
Yeah, thank you guys. That was awesome.
Awesome.
Greg, you're a special guy too, brother.
Yes, sir.
Because I'm around special people.
Yes, sir.
All right, you say so.
All right, guys.
Okay.
All right.
We'll talk to you guys
Thanks
later.
a lot. We'll talk
Take
to
care.
you.
Make it
See
a
ya.
great day.
You do the
Absolutely.
same, Derek. All right, Greg.
That was a good one.
Oh my God. I got kind of goosebumps going here.
Hey, Derek's a good man, and you know what?
Wow.
I mean, he's
Wow.
yeah.
Oh, I mean, that guy.
Him and Coach Brand are my top two.
I mean, and they got so many parallels.
They do. They really do.
It's kind of incredible.
We may have to hook those two up just for a fun conversation.
Yeah.
Seriously,
Yeah.
I mean,
No, they do. They share so many characteristics and history. Their life journeys have been similar.
they're very similar.
They are, and they're both like so passionate. And I mean, Derek speaks, 200 times a year, whatever it is. And I guarantee every single one of them, like this today, he acts like it's the first time he's ever done it. He's like a school kid who just can't wait to share what he
I love
feels.
how he says he's so intentional. He's so conscious.
I love that. I think any kid that gets to play for him, play for Dale Brown,
Yeah.
play for you when you coach, is a
All of
lucky
us,
kid.
we all share
Yeah.
that quality.
Yeah.
It's similar. We all have different paths, but there's the core is the same. I actually believe it's all the same.
Yeah.
We just
No,
have a different story.
I agree with you.